Five distant human ancestors and relatives. Number 5. Cenoidea. About 340 million years ago, something important happened. Some amphibians, who at the time grew larger than today's giant river salamanders but lived similarly, began to produce amniotic eggs. These were eggs which had thin shells, allowing the embryo to breathe, but still solid enough to contain the water an embryo needs. The early creatures who laid such eggs were immediately successful, as this adaptation enabled vertebrates to finally conquer land. The only other animals previously living on land were largely insects, so the amniotes had little resistance as they spread out and diversified into millions of different forms of life. One of the earliest was Cenoidea, a four-legged creature about the size and shape of a modern salamander, only 15 centimeters long. It ate the insects that were plentiful, having had millions of years to themselves to multiply relentlessly on land. In fact, Cenoidea probably spent more time avoiding insects than eating them. Due to a different air composition back then, insects were able to grow much larger. Carnivorous dragonflies sported wingspans of over 70 centimeters. Yet even evading insects 5 times its size did not hold Cenoidea back from thriving and ultimately becoming a key ancestor to the largest animals ever to exist on Earth. Number 4. Edaphosaurids. Edaphosauridae was a family of animals from around 300 million years ago. Edaphosaurs might have resembled dinosaurs, but they and their descendants were synapsids, mammal-like reptiles who diverged from true reptiles 320 million years ago. Edaphosaurids, and their most famous descendants, Introdons, both resembled large modern lizards with spectacular sails along their backs. The function of these sails is still not understood, but it is thought that they were either used for sexual displays or as a heat radiator, an important step towards evolving the thermoregulated blood that all mammals have today. Edaphosaurids were about 3 meters long and were herbivores, eating leafy plants as grass did not evolve until long after they were extinct. Edaphosaurids and other synapsids were the dominant form of life on Earth for millions of years until a mass extinction gave dinosaurs the opportunity to replace them. Number 3. Caissons. After Edaphosauridae, Caissons was the second family of land herbivores. These synapsids existed around 270 million years ago, and were enormous, varying from 1 meter to 6 meters long. They typically had small heads and large, bulky bodies. Unusually for synapsids, the Caissons had teeth which were almost all the same. Generally, a main distinction between mammals and other vertebrates is the teeth. Mammals have more than one type of specialized tooth in the mouth of each individual, whereas in reptiles, fish, and amphibians, all the teeth are uniform. The enormous Caissons with their unusual teeth had thin, snake-like tails and incredibly stocky short limbs, and could weigh in excess of 2 tons. They resembled Komodo dragons with an enormously bloated, barrel-shaped abdomen, making them as tall as an adult human. It is not known if the stocky limbs, with their formidable claws, were as strong as they were so that they could dig for roots, fight potential predators, or if they were strong simply to be able to support their colossal bulk. Number 2. Dinocephalia. This was a group of synapsids from 260 million years ago whose name meant terrible head. They were large and had, most distinguishingly, hideous bony protrusions on their heads, thought to be used for sexual displays and fights. These creatures were less like reptiles and more like mammals. They had a fine coat of hair and walked more upright. Some were carnivores and some herbivores, and in general they grew to several meters long. Although they had many forms, they loosely resembled muscular hippopotamuses with delicate hair, large, interlocking teeth, and bizarrely shaped heads. Their distinguishing skulls, with all their terrible horns and bumps, had a larger brain cavity than their ancestors, beginning a trend that continues for mammals to this day, a gradually increasing brain size. Instead of relying on a perfectly adapted body, which of course becomes useless when the environment changes. Mammals were beginning to rely instead on large brains with an increased ability to learn and adapt during their lifetime, making them capable of learning to live in a variety of environments rather than just one. This would prove to be mammals' greatest strength over the next hundreds of millions of years. Number 1. Prosterognathus. Around the time of the Caesars, a new subgroup of synapsids developed, Therapsids. These were more advanced than their forebears, and had legs which were positioned under their body to hold them up vertically, rather than sticking out sideways to hold them horizontally, like lizards. This enabled the development of more efficient walking rather than crawling. They had much more refined teeth, including for the first time incisors, canines, and molars. They also had the most recognizable mammalian traits, hair and lactation. One key therapsid of 250 million years ago was Prosterognathus. They were forest-dwelling, sleek, carnivorous hunters with large heads and prominent fangs. Although they were about the size of a housecoat, they were incredibly successful, and preyed on the many smaller synapsids of the time. Prosterognathus eventually died out completely in a mass extinction at the end of the Triassic period, which gave dinosaurs the opportunity to replace synapsids as dominant land animals. Nevertheless, the progeny of Prosterognathus survived until the demise of the dinosaurs, when they finally reclaimed their status as the dominant land animal on Earth.